So I tried intermittent fasting for 30 days. Keyword, tried. You may have heard of intermittent fasting before. If you haven't, this health trend is one of the most extreme movements that has taken over the wellness industry over the past decade. It's an unrealistic form of deprivation that will push any sane person to their limits. In other words, intermittent fasting it's basically just skipping breakfast. And while that might not seem all that special or really much of a challenge at all, it has captured a huge audience of devoted IFers. I don't know if that's actually what they call themselves. They should, though. So intermittent fasting, also called timed restricted eating, isn't a diet. It's simply scheduling the time you eat each day. With intermittent fasting, you split your day into two parts: the times you fast and the times you feed. When you fast, you don't eat. It's that simple. One of the most popular fasting schedules, and the one I'm following this month, is 16/8, meaning I will fast for 16 hours, then eat during an 8-hour window. Again, intermittent fasting has nothing to do with what you eat, it's all about when you eat. And as hundreds of thousands of people intentionally skip breakfast or delay it each day, one has to wonder why. The answer? Science. Evidence has shown that intermittent fasting can drop insulin levels, facilitating fat burning. It can increase blood levels of growth hormone, and it induces the body's cellular repair processes. And while I have no idea the meaning behind most of the words I just said, like most things that I don't understand in this world, I simply defer to experts to tell me what to think.
For 100 years, nutrition science has taught us to count calories and watch carb, protein, and fat in our diet. And what we discovered is, it's not only what you eat, when you eat also matters.
Dr. Sachin Panda and his research team found that when mice eat their food within 8 to 12 hours, they remain healthy regardless of what they eat. And that time-restricted eating could reverse the chronic conditions of more than 1 billion people on Earth. The benefits seem clear. It sounds simple enough. What could possibly go wrong? So to help me stay on track and keep track of all my fasts, I'm using an app called Zero. It is probably the best intermittent fasting app online. It's crazy simple. It's beautifully designed. It's even got some research and educational tools inside of it to help you learn a little bit about intermittent fasting. I definitely recommend it, and I've really liked it so far. There it is. I can eat. Yay! So it became apparent pretty quickly that doing intermittent fasting in practice, especially the 16/8 regimen, is actually much more difficult than I had anticipated. This eating schedule means that you really have to plan your days in advance. And that's when I started to run into trouble. So I didn't make it the 16 hours today. This is now the second time that I have not been able to do the full 16 hours. I'm not too bummed out. I just didn't plan really well yesterday. Like, I really should have thought about the fact that I have an early location scout today and that I'm gonna be driving for about an hour and a half to get there, and I definitely need to eat food before. After that, I realized that my typical workout schedule wasn't gonna fit with my new fasting schedule. So I just got finished up with a workout, and now this has happened for the past 2 or 3 days where I felt like I was gonna pass out in the middle of a workout. I go to the gym around 11, which schedules my feeding time, it's really weird to say that, around 12 o'clock. So it's good to help rebuild my muscles after a workout, but the problem is I don't have any fuel for my workout, and when I'm doing cardio and when I'm lifting weights, I feel like I can't push myself as far or lift as much because I just haven't eaten anything. I'm working out on an empty stomach, which is tough. So going forward, I may start to think about rescheduling when I work out, maybe pushing it a little bit later in the day to make sure I do have that fuel. Now, I think it's important to mention that with intermittent fasting, you actually don't have to skip breakfast. You could choose if you wanted to move your feeding time to early in the morning, say from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. But for me and my life personally, and I know from a lot of the people that I've read about online, this is very inconvenient and conflicts with a lot of social activities late at night. So for me, I've decided to skip breakfast, which led me to ask a very important question. Wait a minute, isn't breakfast supposed to be the most important meal of the day?
I love bright fruity tricks!
Tricks?
It's a part of his complete breakfast.
Ever since we were children, we've been fed this idea that breakfast is good for you. And while it shouldn't be a surprise to most people that sugar-packed cereal and waffles drenched in syrup aren't actually a part of a complete breakfast, what about breakfast itself? Is it a complete myth, or is there science to back up the claim? Well, it turns out that actually breakfast is pretty important, it seems like. It seems like it is. Research shows that if you skip breakfast, you are more likely to be overweight, less likely to eat enough fruit and vegetables, and more likely to consume unhealthy snacks. Further, eating protein soon after waking up has been shown to curb afternoon cravings and increase satiation, improving overall weight loss. All that to say that when I researched this topic, I was left very confused, and I wasn't sure if intermittent fasting was really going to be something that would help me in the long run. As with most lifestyle changes, it's really individualized. What works for me or somebody else might not work for the other 7 billion people on the planet. So the unfortunate news is that you can't simply read a research study about this stuff to know if it's going to work for you or not. The truth is that you have to experiment for yourself to find out. And as I continued along with my own experiment, it felt like the negatives continued to outweigh the positives. By day 16, I had accidentally lost 4 pounds. I know most people would actually see this as a positive thing, but I'm personally happy with where my weight is. Much of my life, I've actually struggled to gain weight. And so losing 4 pounds was a sign that restricting the time I was eating was also restricting the amount of calories I was eating. I was so busy working one day that I only had coffee and a few snacks. By the time I finished up my work, I looked at the clock and realized it was 7:30 p.m. and I had 30 minutes before my fast was to start. So I grabbed my keys, I rushed out the door, and stuffed a burrito into my face before 8 o'clock. This is probably a good time to mention that this video is brought to you by my friends over at Squarespace. This burrito is very hot. I only work with sponsors that have added a lot of value to my life, and over the years, Squarespace has done just that. I've chosen to use them to build all my websites because they have beautiful templates that make it easy to build a clean-looking website in no time. If you're a content creator looking to build an audience online, one of the most powerful messaging platforms is email. Set up your website, collect emails, and even send out your campaigns directly from Squarespace. Speaking of which, go sign up for mine. And then go to squarespace.com for a free trial. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MattDiavella to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Sponsors like Squarespace help me to reinvest back into my videos, hire awesome people to work with, and invest in future feature-length documentaries. Thank you, Squarespace. So as this experiment went on, yes, there were negatives. It was difficult to plan out social activities, dinners, and drinks past 8 p.m. But to be honest, I actually kind of liked the feeling of not being full all the time. And it even curbed the amount of snacks that I eat on a daily basis. So score 2 for intermittent fasting. But unfortunately, I don't think that was enough to win me over. Now, I know that this has worked for a lot of people, and I've read countless blogs online from people who have said that intermittent fasting completely changed their lives. But for me, at least for this experiment, at least for the 16:8 protocol, it changed my life in a negative way. It got in the way of my life and also in the way of the lives of my family and friends and the people that I hang out with on a weekly basis. If I'm being completely honest, intermittent fasting was a pain in the ass. In total, I broke my fast early 6 out of the 30 days. It's not that I forgot that I was trying to fast, it's that I realized I simply didn't want to anymore. And if I got anything from this experiment, it wasn't that intermittent fasting made me feel better, more energized, and it didn't optimize my life in any way. It taught me that you can be happy to fail. When I got to the point that I'd put in enough effort into the process and I still wasn't enjoying it, I still didn't see the value in it, I was happy to break the rule. Once you start disliking the process, it's time to start thinking about making a change. But you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Are you quitting because you don't like the process or because you're afraid of failing? Are you having a bad month or a bad day? If the sum of what you're doing doesn't make you happy, it's time to make a change. That's gonna mean realistically, you'll go through some shit that you don't like. You'll drag your feet for too long doing something you hate. And that's okay. That's part of life and it's a part of the process. But the more experience you get, the more you realize your path, your purpose, and the direction you should be heading. So I don't know if this is the end for me when it comes to intermittent fasting. I may perhaps experiment with it again in the future, probably with something a little bit less extreme, maybe doing a 12-hour fast or a circadian fast, which is to the rhythm of the sun and your natural circadian rhythm. But for this 30-day experiment, I could certainly say that it was a failure. And I'll be honest, I'm totally cool with that.